Well, good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to this live stream. And I'm really sorry that the original link did not work out. I'm not sure if I did something wrong, but I've done live streams before and I've never had this issue. So it's funny because every time I try to use that link, the system would tell me, we're waiting for Jenny McIntyre. And I'm like, I'm Jenny McIntyre. So welcome to 10 Things I Learned About Grief. 10 Things I Learned About Grief. I'm trying to give it 15 more seconds because I'm afraid some of you might be still waiting on the other link, but it is what it is, and the beautiful thing is that this will be streamed and then I will have the video, so I will be able to post it. Well, I'm going to get started to be respectful of those of you that are here. And remember that when we're done, hi Karen, when we're done, I am going to be answering specific questions, so please make sure that you put your questions in the link because I am in my computer. I am going to be checking for your questions. And so give me just a second. I will mute myself on the computer so that I can be looking at your questions. So make sure that you are shooting those questions because you don't have to wait until the end. I will be looking at my chats in my computer and I will be answering your questions as we go along. The first of the 10 things that, let me just start by saying Monday is August the 1st, and last year on August the 1st, my husband John had been ill. JC, John and I had been ill. We were getting ready to go on summer camp and we started coughing and John was like, I don't have COVID. And I'm like, yeah, maybe you don't. But we are getting ready to go with a bunch of kids to camp. So the responsible thing is to test ourselves to at least confirm that we don't have COVID. Well, sure enough, we test. JC, John and I are test positive for COVID. Astrid test negative. And I already had a place for her to go. Because at that moment, Astrid was selling tickets to a show that West Coast Black Theater Troupe was promoting for her, and the money that we were going to collect was going towards her tuition. And it was something really important for Astrid. So I had said, Astrid, if you test negative, that I don't want you to come back with us to the house because I don't want you to take a chance and get sick. Sure enough, John, JC, and I test positive. Astrid tests negative. I wave goodbye. She goes to stay in the house of a darling friend of ours. JC, John, and I return home. That must have been like, I'm thinking maybe September the 30th or the 31st. Now we know we have COVID. And, it was a bad cold. I remember putting, wet towels on John's forehead, and he was drinking his NyQuil, his Dayquil and his NyQuil. And we're like, oh, this will go away. And we were super frustrated because we had to cancel the summer camp. So we were super angry. And we thought that was the worst thing ever. We had people here from Panama. We had people here from other places that had come exclusively to be with us at the camp. We have a bunch of kids that were excited, right like we have right now. Right now, we're leaving next Thursday. So at any rate, guys, we thought that was the end of the world, the worst thing. And it's so interesting that to put things in perspective, because on August the 1st, which was John's birthday, he collapsed here at home. And when he collapsed, I knew that I needed to do something. So I called an ambulance, I called 911. Manatee Memorial Hospital is just literally 5 minutes away. And I said goodbye to John. I couldn't go with him immediately because he was going to go into the COVID unit and they didn't allow people there. And I semi-kissed him I was a little frustrated with him because he had not gotten his shot. That night, it was August the 1st, so it was his birthday. So it was just, I had planned a big surprise party for him for the 7th of August. It's going to be a big roast because he was turning 60. And when he got to the hospital, he just sent a text message to Astrid, JC, and me. And he was like, guys, I'm so sorry. I should have gotten the shot. I'm sorry that I'm putting you guys through this. I'll make it up for you guys. And of course, he never made it out. We prayed, believed for a miracle. I had no doubts that John was going to be okay. I had no doubts that he was going to make it out of the hospital. I had no doubts that God was going to do a miracle. And then the time went by, and on September 2nd, I received a call from the hospital that one of John's lungs had exploded. And they're like, the only way to save him now is by opening his chest and doing this and doing that. And I'm like, no. I felt in my heart at that moment that I did not want to subject John to any more physical torture. He was in a coma. I know that he could hear our voices. I didn't want anything else to be done. And I'm like, if God's going to heal him, God's going to heal him. Well, to make a long story short, they say, well, as soon as we take all those things away, he's going to go, so you might want to say goodbye. And I attempted to say goodbye to John over the phone, but then I called a pastor friend. She's like, no, Jenny, you need to be there. Do whatever you need to do to be there. So I called him back. I'm like, I want to be there. I had to sign a bunch of paper, and I got there. And, you know, I went there and I was like, Papi, there's going to be a miracle right now. Whether that miracle is that you get up and you start breathing, and all these doctors and all these nurses are going to be running in fear and shock and terror because a miracle has happened before their very eyes. Or you could get an even greater miracle, which is the Lord might just take you home and you will never be sick again and you will be in eternity, and that will be an amazing miracle. And what I noticed is that as soon as I started talking to John, his oxygen levels and his heartbeat would like increase. And then when I would stop talking to him, they would decrease. And then when I would start like making jokes and touching his hand, it would increase. And at some point I just took a deep breath and I felt like God was saying, it's time. So I remember putting my hand on him and saying, Papi, it's time. Our Heavenly Father is waiting for you with open arms. You fought really, really hard. It's been a month and a day. We're going to be okay. Astrid and JC are going to be okay. I'm going to continue with the church. The church is going to be okay. People are going to know that God is faithful. I will make sure that I tell people how faithful God is. And at that precise moment, I said, you've been the best husband. You've been the best father. Go, run to our Father. Run to our Father. And he ran to our Father at that moment, guys, because the minute I said that, before they take any of the tubes out, his heartbeat and his oxygen level started decreasing. And my husband crossed over to eternal life. And the nurses and the doctors said, oh my gosh, we wanted to take all those tubes out so that the last image that you have of your husband is not with all these tubes. And they asked me to turn around, and I did it and got on my knees and started praying. And I still couldn't cry. I still couldn't feel pain because I was feeling something really special, like God's presence in that room. Like, oh my gosh, like I am witnessing a miracle. I could literally feel that John had crossed from death to life, that he had received a new body. And that was confirmed when the doctors and the nurses told me, okay, turn around now, he's ready for you to look at him. And when I looked at my husband, I knew my husband was no longer there. Right before I let him go, I was holding so hard to his hands. I was smelling. I wanted to never forget how he smelled, how he looked. But when I turned around and he had already received his body and he had crossed eternity, it was like I knew instinctively that body in that bed was no longer my husband's home. And I have no doubts that I experienced the most amazing miracle. Now, having said all that, for the next 17 days, I was on adrenaline. I was preparing his celebration of life. I was talking to people. I was trying to take care of my children. My poor Astrid, I had dropped her in campus in college 2 weeks into her dad's hospitalization, so she was in college. I drove all the way down there to tell her in person. And I was planning his celebration of life, and I was on adrenaline, and I was sad, and I was crying, but it was a different kind of suffering. Then came his celebration of life, and I felt that God really gave me power that day to speak. And if you guys want to see it, it's there. I mean, it's there for posterity because we live streamed it, and it's in the page of Pastor John McIntyre, Heaven's Homecoming. But then, as soon as the life celebration passed, my husband's absence hit me. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I cannot even explain. And so I'm going to go directly into the 10 things that I've learned, because that's what you guys came here for, to hear. And in so doing, I will share my experience, and please ask me questions. Ask me questions because I am very, very interested in knowing what you guys want to know, what you guys want to. I want this to be a great opportunity for us to talk. Okay, so make sure that you're asking me questions. The first thing that I learned is that it's very easy to forget we are here temporarily. And it's funny because I'm a pastor and I believe in eternal life. And I talk about it all the time. I talk to my kids about heaven. John and I spoke to people about heaven. John and I ran funerals, had to be with people that had lost friends and loved ones. And we encourage people so many times with scriptures and letting them know we're here temporarily. The Bible says that all our days are numbered in the book of God and whatever. But I discovered when John died that although I was saying it, I was forgetting it. John and I had plans that we were going to grow old together. John and I were going to retire in Panama or in Central America and grow old together, ministering to people. We had said, how cool would it be if we die at a moment where we're preaching? And I'll never forget, at one point we were in a little tiny church in Panama preaching, and it was raining, and the electric connection to the microphone was really like just made up. It wasn't anything professional. And we kind of whispered to each other, this might be it. But we survived it. And still, we thought that because of our lifestyle, because everything that we had going on, because of all of that, we would be okay. And we never, ever, ever, ever anticipated that John would die so young. We never anticipated it. And so it's easy to forget that we're here temporarily. Even when we know it, it's hard. And I think that God has created in all of us the desire to be alive, because life on this earth is a gift from Him. And so we forget. And I realized that I forgot, because once I started thinking about John's death, and even till this day, it's like, how is this possible? When the question should be, why would it not be possible? The reality is that we all have a shelf expiration date. The truth is that the Bible says in the book of Psalms that all our days are written in God's book. And the reality is that, when you look around and you hear of people that go on shooting rampages or drunk drivers, or so I was hearing to a story this morning of this couple that got married, and 2 or 3 days later, the guy just killed her. And this lady died in a super expensive hotel in Fiji 3 days after her wedding. it's so easy to forget that we're here temporarily. And so what I've learned is that I used to be very future focused. And don't get me wrong, it's not that I'm not looking at the future. I still have to plan. I still have to figure out how I'm going to pay for Astrid college, put JC through the end of high school. I still have to plan for church. But I have learned that I need to keep in mind that the only moment I have guaranteed is today. And if you are listening to me and you have someone that you love, know that you only have today. You no longer have tomorrow. And you have no guarantees. You no longer have the past, I'm sorry. You no longer have yesterday. And you have no guarantees that you are going to see a tomorrow. So hold on to the person you have. Love on them. Spend time with them. Tell them how much you love them. I told John that I loved him all the time, to the point where it was ridiculous, because we had been married for 23 years and I was still really goo-goo gaga over that man. Don't forget, let's not forget that we're here only temporarily, that whatever it is that you're going through, whether it's bad or good, is temporary. And so if it's good, hold on to it and enjoy it and cherish it. And if it's bad, hold on, because it's going to get better. It's not going to stay like this forever. The second thing I learned is that you cannot relate until you can relate. I'm going to repeat that again. You cannot relate until you can relate. There are 2 regrets that I've had ever since John died. Number 1, I wish I would have held on to him even tighter than I did. I wish I had told him even more times than I loved him, although I told him all the time. We had 23 years, but they weren't long enough. I should have done more. That's one regret, and I think it's a normal regret. The second regret is that although every time I would see someone that needed comfort because they were grieving the loss of a loved one, I tried my very best to understand. I tried to be quiet. I tried to listen. I remember John and I, in many occasions, would walk into someone's house and just start crying with them. We didn't want to say anything. We didn't want to sound religious. But even then, I realized that I really didn't relate. I really didn't understand what they were going through, because I have not gone through it. And that's important to know, because during the last 11 months, I've had a lot of people that have never gone through what I've been going through, and they've tried very hard to tell me that I need to be acting differently. And I had an amazing friend the other day for lunch, and she told me that there was a period of time that she had to mute me, unfollow me, not unfriend me, but unfollow me on Facebook, because she started getting more and more and more worried about my sadness and my depression. And I get it, and I appreciate her honesty, but hers is a perfect illustration of how you cannot relate until you can relate. You cannot know what it feels to lose your husband until you've lost your husband. I have a friend that lost her adult child. You cannot understand. I cannot understand. It doesn't really matter how hard I try. And so, whether you have suffered loss, or whether you have someone around you that has suffered loss, if you have suffered loss and you are receiving insensitive comments, if people are not being there for you, if they are not giving you what you believe they need to be giving you, remember, they cannot relate. until they can relate. They will never fully understand until they go through it themselves. And if you are trying to comfort someone that is going through grief, please remember the same thing. Unless you've lost a very close relative and the relationship is the same or quite close, you cannot relate. And if we cannot relate, then we probably should hold back our advice. Because advices are like nails. Everybody has one. And when you're going through this, you really don't want advice. You want prayer, you want company, you want understanding, you want validation. You don't want advice. And when I've wanted an advice, I've specifically reached out to people that have had the same loss and I've asked for their advice. And I have been willing to listen to them because they are talking from a place of understanding. But you cannot relate until you've been through it, until you walk in that person's shoes. You know, when it was Thanksgiving, you know, John died on September, and that first Thanksgiving was hard. And I remember a couple of pastors that were friends, at least at that time, sent me a picture of them kissing one another with a note that said, "We hope you're having a fantastic Thanksgiving." Now, why would they do that? Because they cannot relate. They have not gone through what I have gone through, so they cannot understand why 2 months after my husband's death, even though I know he's in heaven, I was incapable of having a fantastic Thanksgiving. So understand that if someone near you has lost someone and you haven't lost someone, just feel their pain, acknowledge their pain, listen to them, but try not to give advice or opinions, because the reality is, unless you've had the same loss, you cannot relate. And if, like me, you've lost someone and have been subject of insensitive comments or actions, be patient and be forgiven. It doesn't necessarily mean that you stay right there and you allow the person to keep doing things that are going to hurt you, but just have mercy and grace, because you cannot relate until you can relate. All right, I don't see any questions yet, so I'm going to keep going. 13. Grief's intensity and duration is personal. I have a therapist, I have a friend pastor, and I have people in my life, not a lot, but some, that have lost their husbands. And what I've discovered and what my therapist has confirmed is that grief is very personal. There is not such a thing as after 5 months you need to be feeling better, or after 10 months you need to be feeling better, or after, my therapist has told me, and listening to her saying this terrifies me. She says, I've had clients that have been in mourning for 8 years and they still feel it raw. And I'm like, oh my God, I hope I'm not one of those. Because this pain is so intense. Sometimes I can barely tolerate it one day. I don't know what I would do if 8 years. But the point is, I only have today. I don't need to be okay for the next 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, because I have zero control over it. All I can focus on is on my grief today, and understand that the intensity of my grief and how long it's going to take, it's completely related to me, my psychological and emotional makeup, my lifestyle, my relationship with my God, etc., etc., etc. It's personal. So if another friend was able to recover in 5 months and another friend, it's taken them 8 years, that's nothing to me. Maybe we can compare notes as to how they've coped, things they've done to help them feel better, but the intensity is absolutely dependent upon the intensity of my love for John, and my love for John was intense. And the duration is personal. And I've had to tell my friends that, because I've had friends that have told me, either tacitly or directly, shouldn't you feel better at this point? As I said, they cannot relate because they had not been there. And even if they had been there, the intensity of their own grief and the duration of that grief would be completely personal. There is not a book that establishes how long we grieve. Now, the Bible does say that when Moses died, the people mourning for 1 month. So what I believe the Bible does teaches, and if you don't believe in the Bible, that's fine, just, but the Bible does say, establishes that there is a beginning and there's an end for mourning. It says that there's time to mourn and time to laugh. But it doesn't tell us how long it's supposed to last. And we need to be very sensitive about that and try not to rush people. But if you're the one that are going through pain, don't do what I have done to myself on many occasions. And that is, Jenny, get over it. Jenny, you need to feel better. Jenny, come on, Jenny, what kind of faith do you have? Jenny, you should be... Listen, the person that has treated me the worst in the last 11 months has been me. God has been faithful, patient. I've always felt his love, his kindness towards me. But man, I've been so harsh on myself. So if you are going through grief and the intensity is more than you know what to do with, please know that there are no rules, that the intensity and the duration of your grief are personal and that you are entitled to it. And if you have a person near to you that is going through grief, please remember that too. Please don't put any pressure on that person. Get done with your grief already, because that's not necessarily under that person's control. And to be quite honest, it's much better for that person to go through that pain, to really feel those emotions, than to pretend that they're okay. So again, I've learned it's easy to forget that we're here temporarily. You cannot relate until you can relate and have been in those shoes. And number 3, grief's intensity and duration is personal. There is not a set rule. All right. Number 4, the change curve is actually like an infinity sign. It's like a little fish that goes like this. I have thought the change curve, the mourn curve, the loss curve, whatever you want to call it. It's basically a curve that has to do with how we process things that are difficult. And there's a period of anger, there's a period of sadness, there's a period of acceptance, etc., etc., etc. But what I have discovered in the last 10 months is that it's actually like an infinity sign. Because sometimes I'm sad, then I get angry, then I'm like back feeling grateful for what I had with John, then I get angry again, then I'm sad, then I feel better, then 5 minutes later, I'm sad again. I joke with my church people and I tell them that my faith has become bipolar because it changes by the minute. But it's because the change curve is actually an infinity sign. It evolves. When it comes to grief, I've discovered that you are going to go back to anger. You are going to then feel better. You are going to go back to sadness. And it does not mean that you are not making progress. That is not what it means. It means that you're human. It means that you have emotions. And depending on the situation that you're facing and the kind of day you're having, you might go back to specific feelings. When I'm with Astrid or JC in a school program or in a gig, or they have milestones, I still want to text John or call him and say, did you see our daughter? Did you see our son? When I have a bad day at work, I miss him more because I used to have him. I used to be able to tell him and like pray for me or give me advice, and that's no longer there. So depending on the situation, that change curve, you're going to notice that you're going to go back and forth between specific feelings, and it is okay. What I believe time will do is it will lessen the intensity of the changes, but the changes will be there nonetheless. And do not make the mistake that I made in believing that if I went from happy to sad and then happy and angry, do not make the mistake I made, which was like, oh my gosh, I must not be advancing. I must not be advancing because I'm going backwards. No, that's not what it means. It just means that the change curve is not necessarily goes in progression. It may progress and then it may change depending on the situation, depending on the day you're having. All right, I'm checking for questions. I have none yet. All right, I keep going. Number 5, grief is an unsolved issue. You are never going to understand entirely why your loved one was taken. I don't have all the answers about why John was taken. And the sooner you get to that realization, the better. Because grief is not something that you can resolve on this side of the sun. Now, I know that some of you that are listening are not believers, and you know I'm completely respectful, right? But as a pastor and as a believer, I speak from that perspective. I know where John is. I know he's happy and he's safe. But I don't understand why God allowed him to be taken, because we were engaged, we had a loving marriage, we were raising 2 amazing kids, we were in the streets helping the homeless, serving God together. I look around me and I see people that are killers and thieves and mean. And at the beginning, right after John died, I was like, Lord, how come they're alive and John's not? That's not fair. And although God has whispered a lot of things to my ear, the reality is that I don't know for a fact, I don't know 100%, and maybe I'll never will fully understand why he was taken. At least not on this side of the sun. Grief is an unsolved issue, and the sooner we get to that realization, the better. There are questions for which there will not be answers. And that's rough, guys. Because we want to be in control. And I tell people, I said, if John had been 95, I would have had an easier time tolerating it, because it's like, okay, it's the circle of life, right? But he was so young, and we had so much life ahead of us. For me, in my limited human mind, it makes no sense. And it's a decision I have to make every day. It's a decision you have to make every day. I don't understand, and it is okay. I don't have the answers, at least not all of them. And I want. Now, don't do what I did. When John first died, I remember praying to God. And I said, you don't owe me an explanation. So I'm not going to ask you why. And every time the word why would want to come, I would just hold it in. Then I started getting angry. And I started saying, well, even if you wanted to give me a reason, don't even bother. Because no reason you can give me is good enough for me. I am not going to forgive you for allowing my John to be taken. But then one day, I couldn't hold it anymore. I remember going to bed and reaching to the side where John normally laid, and just deep, deep from my soul, I started saying, why? Lord, why? Father, why? And I remember rocking myself to sleep as I asked that word. And it's interesting because it was not resolved. God did not send an angel that told me, this is why. But it made me a world of good to throw my emotional tantrum. And every once in a while, I still throw that emotional tantrum. I still ask God why. Not because I'm expecting Him to answer, but because I want to express my pain. And God has no problem with me expressing my pain. I always like to say that Jesus died in front of the tomb of his best friend Lazarus. He knew he was going to raise him from the dead, and Jesus still cried. Why? Because seeing someone that you love die is painful. But grief is an unresolved issue. And the sooner we come to that conclusion, the better. Even if we ask why. It's a natural behavior, but little by little coming to the understanding that we will not have all the answers is really going to be helpful. Or I found it to be, helpful. Number 6, I said grief is an unresolved issue. And number 6 is people are not comfortable with unsolved pain. People are not comfortable. People want you to be okay. They get really uncomfortable with you if you're constantly in front of them and your issue has not been resolved. It's hard for them to stick around. I just told you about my awesome friend Daniela. She told me, I had to mute you for a while because it was too much for me to tolerate. I have people that disappeared from my life for a while. Because my pain, my grief was so intense, they just couldn't deal with it. And it's okay, because you cannot relate until you can relate. And people are uncomfortable with unsolved pain or unsolved issues. And grief is an unsolved issue. On this side of the sun, the problem I have, which is I have become widowed too soon. And my husband has been taken away from me. And I'm raising 2 teenagers, and life overwhelms me as a single mom. That issue is not going to resolve itself on this side of the sun. And people are very uncomfortable with unresolved issue and unresolved pain. They want you to be happy. And something I've discovered is that there is such a thing as being too happy. I think now I am a lot more cognizant of people's pain. I think now even when I'm happy and I post something, I try to temper it because I think there may be somebody like me who is in a permanent status of heartbrokenness. And I don't ever want to rub in my happiness, although being happy is not been that easy in the last 11 months. I've had joy. When I think of John being happy and not in pain and being perfect and knowing everything and talking to important people in heaven, but I don't think I've been happy. And I don't know if I ever will be. And that's okay. Because grief is an unsolved issue. But people are not comfortable with unsolved issues. And so you need to start telling your friends. You need to start telling your friends. If you've lost someone and you have friends that are rushing you, you need to start telling them the truth. I've told some. I said, I know that my pain makes you really uncomfortable, but it is an unsolved issue and it's not going to get resolved anytime soon. Or I know that you are very uncomfortable that I am still crying, but you need to give me the freedom to cry for as long as I need to cry. And I've had friends that have come back and said, I'm really sorry, Jenny, I didn't mean it. I've had other friends that have gotten offended and are no longer around. Fine with me. It's been a little painful, but fine with me because we all have choices to make. I choose to understand that my grief is an unresolved issue. I understand also that people do not like unresolved issues, that it makes them really uncomfortable. And because of that, I make a decision. If someone can be uncomfortable but still respect my boundaries and support me and not trying to push their you need to be better now so I stop being uncomfortable agenda on me, then I can keep that friend, I can keep that relationship. But if someone is not able to control that, then it's not good for them, and it certainly is not good for me for us to maintain a relationship. So grief is an unsolved issue. And people are not comfortable with unsolved pain. And they don't need to be comfortable because that's part of human nature, but they do need to be respectful. Number 7, and it goes directly with what I just discussed. People that grieve have regrets. They don't need help. And this is more for people that are dealing with people that have lost. Like, I've had people saying things to me like, God never promised that your husband would live forever. Or, God is faithful no matter what. Or, focus on the fact that John is in heaven. And see, none of these 3 statements are false. They are 100% truth. But when they are given to me in the context of my grief, what they do is they add to my sadness. They don't take my sadness away. They add to my sadness because they are told to me in judgment. And as Astrid and I were talking about a completely related issue, even if the person is not giving it to the person that's grieving as judgment, grief will make that person feel as if they're being judged. If you really were a woman of faith, you would stop crying so much because John is in heaven. If you really were a woman of faith, you would have recovered by now. And even if what my friend or what people are saying is not that, that's the way my grief processes it. Therefore, if you are listening to me and you have someone in your life that has lost someone, remember, we already have regrets. It's normal to have regrets. Oh, what if I had, I should have spent more. It's normal to have regrets. So we don't need anything in addition. We don't need any more pain. We're already carrying a heavy burden. So to have people want to rush your grief or to insinuate that for some reason, if you are still crying or if you're still sad or if you're expressing sadness, you're less than, that only adds. That doesn't help. That just adds. And if you are the person going through grief and you've been confronted by people that are trying to make you feel guilty, even if they don't intend it, if that is the impact they're having on you, you need to stop. Boundaries are important, and that takes us to the 8th thing I have found during the last 11 months. I have chosen and I have decided that I must forgive those who hurt me during my period of grief. But forgiving them doesn't mean that I have to stay there, neither in the situation nor in the relationship, to allow them to hurt me more. John used to say something very wise. He used to say, forgiveness is a one-way street. You can forgive someone. Even if that person has not repented, even if that person doesn't feel sorry that they hurt you, you can forgive them, and you must forgive them, because not forgiving is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to fall dead. That makes no sense, right? When you don't forgive, you are the one retaining the poison. So it is in your best interest, it is in my best interest to forgive. It doesn't mean that you forget what was done to you. You just choose not to hold it against that person, not to allow those thoughts to consume you. Is it easy? No, it is not easy. But it's absolutely a must that we learn to forgive. But what John said then, and by that he quoted a Bible verse that says, in what it respects to you, live in peace with everybody. And that is, although forgiveness is a one-way street, reconciliation is a two-way street. It takes for you to forgive the person and for that person to be willing to come back to you and not keep the behavior. And so if a person hurts you because they want to rush your grief, because they want to preach that you need to get better sooner rather than later, or because they want to send you pictures and tell you how wonderful they're doing and you should be doing wonderful too, if you forgive them. But clearly establish boundaries. Clearly tell them, when you tell me this, it makes me feel like. And I've had conversations like that. I told someone, one of my spiritual daughters, I said, I have worked with you for years. When John died, you were not close. And now that you've come back, you send me a clip of a video where someone's preaching about faith and heaven. I said, it is disrespectful. It shows very little compassion. That person's reply was to send me another video clip. I blocked them and cut them out of my life, because they just added to it, added to the offense. They were not willing to respect my boundaries. But I've had friends too that I communicated something and they've come back and they say, I am so sorry. I don't understand what you're going through. I'm sorry that I hurt you. I'll try better. And in those instances, I can continue having a relationship with them, because when you're in grief, you have to take care of you. Being in grief, it makes you very vulnerable. And you don't need extra. You need to protect your heart and your mind. And what I've discovered is that some people are okay and they're humble enough to say, you know what? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I was insensitive. But there are other people that are too arrogant for that. And so I forgive both groups. But I only remain in relationship with one of those two. I remain in relationship with people that apologize and that promise me they're going to try better. And it's not a matter of them being perfect. It's not a matter of them never making a mistake or never saying something that is insensitive. Absolutely not. It's a matter of them being committed to try to respect me, to try to honor my pain, to give me the distance and the space I need to hurt. But if someone is not willing to do that, I forgive them. I don't need to keep that person in my life. The Bible says, warn a divisive person once, warn them twice, and after that, have nothing to do with them. And when you are in grief, that is a powerful verse to remember. I've had to do it for my own good. Sometimes it's sad, but I had to do it for my own good, for my own health. Number 9, we're almost there. I have discovered that it is okay for me to feel the rawness of my emotions as long as I don't let my emotions call the shots. It is okay for us when we're dealing with grief to feel the rawness of our emotions. We just can't allow our emotions to call the shots, because if I was allowing my emotions to call the shots, I would still be in bed with covers on top of my head, crying myself to sleep. I would still not have a job. I would not be pastoring a church. And I might be in a mental institution. I'm not exaggerating. That's how bad it's been. So I have felt the rawness of my emotions. I have said why. I have said I miss my husband. Just earlier today, I was telling Astrid, I missed your dad so much. I felt my emotions. But in spite of being sad, in spite of being angry, in spite of feeling hopeless, in spite of whatever way I feel, I have gotten up every day to go to work. I have forced myself to be there for my children, forced myself to be there for my congregation, forced myself to work, forced myself to move forward. So feeling sadness is the best thing you can do. Because if you are in denial about your pain, it's going to take longer to heal. We don't know how long it takes for you to heal, because as we said earlier, grief is very personal. But one thing we know for sure, the sooner you start feeling your emotions and being honest about how your loss has impacted you, the sooner you'll start on the road of recovery. And I have felt every emotion, and I have shared that emotion with my children, with my church, with my group of close friends, with my prayer group. I've done it. I've been honest. When I've been desperate, when there's been nights where I couldn't sleep, I've grabbed the phone and said, SOS, I need help. Please help me. And I've had people pray for me. So I have felt my emotions. I just haven't allowed my emotions to call the shots. The Bible says that our heart is deceitful. Our emotions are deceitful. And so it's okay to feel my emotions. I'm just not allowing them to call the shots. Have I felt during these months like I want to die? Yes. Have I felt like quitting on life? Yes. Have I felt like I couldn't survive one more minute without John? Mm-hmm. But I have not allowed those emotions to keep me down. And that takes me to the 10th thing I found. I have found that it is absolutely essential to have a powerful why, to hold on to hope and to hold on to life. If you are going through grief, find a powerful why to hold on to hope and to hold on to life. See, my why was already there before John died. We had a family mission. The family mission was we exist to love God and change lives. So even while John was struggling in the hospital, even after he died, I had a focus. My focus was still to change lives. And I knew that how I handled John's loss would have an impact on the people that I loved and the people that are close to me or my friends at large. I knew. So I had a powerful why to cry but keep fighting. I had 2 teenagers that were looking at me. I didn't want them to give up on life. I had my sister, her family, my nieces, my nephews. my friends. And so when I went through the darkest moments, and I still do, I have a beautiful repertoire of why I'm still here on this earth. There's God and my love for Him. There's my children. There's my church here, our church in Panama, our church in Honduras. There's all my followers on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. I must set the example. I must refuse to allow grief to defeat me. See, I can feel grief, but I won't allow it to defeat me. And so I am not looking forward to Monday. I'm praying that I'll be able to handle it, but the truth is, it's John's birthday, the first birthday since I met him, where I won't be with him. And though I'm happy that he's going to be with Jesus and celebrating with the angels and the saints and happy and whole and probably not even missing me, I will miss him. I miss him right now. My children and I are going to get together and do something to celebrate his life, but he's still not going to be here. But I have powerful whys to stick around and to keep fighting. I wish I could tell you that I'm still here and that I'm still fighting because I'm strong, but that's not true. And the truth of the matter is, you might not be either. Focusing on self can be a slippery slope. So I've spent a lot of time during my grief period focusing on my own pain and my sadness, but at the same token, I have taken a lot of time focusing on others. How can I pray for you? How can I be there for you? Astrid, how can I serve you? JC, do you need mommy to help you in any way? Talking to my friends in Facebook, doing posts, doing videos, starting my own business to help people in the area of emotional intelligence, being there for my employer, my coworkers, to support them, to encourage them. I have a huge list of whys, and the list gets longer by the minute. And so my advice to you is, if you are feeling sad, if you are having a hard time holding on to hope, find a powerful why. Find a powerful why. And so I'm going to start wrapping this up. This is what I found in the last months since John was taken 11 months ago. I found that it's easy to forget that we are here temporarily. We must remember, so that when death happens, because it will happen, because we all have expiration dates on us, it'll be a tad easier to handle, just a tad easier. Number 2, you cannot relate until you can relate. Unless people have gone through the same loss, doesn't matter how hard they try, they won't be able to understand. So exercise patience, but create boundaries. Number 3, grief's intensity and duration is personal. Don't let anybody tell you when you're supposed to stop feeling sad. I won't. I want to stop feeling sad. I just don't want anybody to impose that on me, because God's not doing it. So why should anybody else do that to me, right? The change curve is actually a change infinity cycle. Your emotions are going to go from sadness to anger to joy to acceptance, and then no, I don't accept it, Now I'm angry again. Now I'm sad. I mean, it's like a constant circle. Or if you want a shorter way to say that, bipolar fate, like I call my fate. Grief is an unsolved issue. That's number 5. It is an unsolved issue. There are answers that we will never have on this side of the earth. There are things that we will not completely understand. We don't have the whole picture, nor we should desire to have it. We don't have the ability to do that. Number 6, people are not comfortable with unsolved pain. They are not comfortable. And sometimes, in the midst of that discomfort, they will act out. They will act out. They will say what they're not supposed to say. They will try to preach to you. They will try to correct you. They will try to boss you. They will try to tell you how you're supposed to act or feel because they are not comfortable with unsolved pain. But it is okay because grief is an unsolved pain. Don't let anybody rush you. Understand that they're uncomfortable, but don't allow them to rush you or to push you into feeling whichever way because your grief, intensity, and duration is personal. Number 7, people that grieve have regrets. They don't need help. You don't need help. I don't need any extra reason to be sad. So I have had to eliminate people from my life that in the zest of helping me out have just added to my sorrow by preaching to me, by giving me advice, by letting me know how I'm supposed to feel. I have enough regrets. I have enough sadness that I'm dealing with. I don't need any extra. Forgive those who hurt you, but don't stay in that relationship. When you are grieving, boundaries are important. It is not okay for people to batter you or to push you or to chastise you because you're sad. And if someone doesn't want to respect that boundary, you have to create it. You have to draw a line in the sand and say, listen, I forgive you, but if you cannot respect my grief, if you cannot respect my right to be sad, then we can't have a relationship right now. It's called boundaries. It's called establishing limits. After all, the golden rule says that we're supposed to love others like we love ourselves, so we need to love ourselves. And loving ourselves indicates that you can forgive those who hurt you, but you have to reconcile and be in a relationship with those that hurt you and have not acknowledged that they've hurt you and do not intend to change their behavior. Number 9 is that it is okay when we're grieving to feel all the rawness of our emotions. The sadness, the anger. Like I always tell the father, I'm going to go on the floor and, like a little girl and throw a tantrum because you took away my John. It's okay to feel the rawness of your emotions. Just don't let those emotions call the shots. Feel the pain. Cry on the floor if you must. Just don't sit down. Keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing. And that takes us to number 10. Find a powerful way to stick around. Find a why. Why must I stay around? Who in this world am I still making a difference for? And don't make that decision on your own, because when we're grieving, we can be very harsh on ourselves. I know, because I can be that way. Ask people, what do I mean to you? Collect a powerful why or a powerful whys you must stick around. Because the more reasons you have to stick around, the tighter you're going to hold on to hope and life itself. That's it. Those are the 10 things I discovered. Now, I am opening the floor. I'm going to stick around for a little bit to see if you guys have any questions. And yeah, and if you happen to see this video at a time where it was no longer live, just know that I will always have the notifications on. And if you ask a question and it's not live, I will come to you and I will answer those questions later. So again, I'm going to open the floor now for a few more minutes to answer any questions that you guys may have. What questions you guys may have? I'm so happy that you guys joined in. As I wait for questions, I just want to say that I'm so grateful. Some of you know me, some of you do not, but some of you have walked the last almost year with me. I thank you. Some of you have watched me from a distance, some of you have stuck closer than a brother. I'm so grateful. So grateful. And if you're going through grief, just know that you're not alone. It stinks. Life can be really sucky. Can be really honest. By the way, I'm speaking of life being sucky and really honest. I think that I'm feeling good enough to go back to finalizing my book. So very soon I'm going to give you guys information about my book. It's my life and I'll cry if I want to. It is so funny because I've been writing this book since JC was inside of my tummy, and JC is 14 years old. And there's a lot of things that I wrote that speak to me now, 14 years later. Speak to me, speak to my loss, speak to my grief. So yeah. Well, I don't want to extend this video too much longer. Oh, thank you. Good evening to you too. Hi. So I'm just gonna give it 2 more minutes, small talk, and then if I don't get any questions, I will just close. But I'm happy and grateful that you guys joined in. Karen, I'm very grateful to have you in my life too. I'm very, very grateful. You've prayed me through the darkest days. We've prayed each other, haven't we, through the darkest days of our lives. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's my life and I'll cry if I want to. It's gonna be a great book. It's gonna have the story of 7 women. It's gonna be like a tell-all and of how they struggle and how they push forward and all that good stuff. So, all right, so I'm gonna wrap it up. And if you wanna drop your questions, I will answer them later. But right now, I need to finish cleaning the house and doing the dishes because tomorrow is Sunday and I have to prepare for the big party we throw Jesus every single Sunday here in Bradenton, Florida. If you're going through grief, please know you're not alone. I get it. Before, I had an idea, but now I get it. I get that there are days that it's very hard. I get that there are days that you feel like you cannot breathe, and thank you, Brandon. I know that there are days that you feel like you cannot breathe and you feel like you can't leave 1 more minute without your loved one. I know that there are days where I don't know, but in my case, like there are days where I still want to text John or call him, or I feel his keys on the door, and the force of habit, 23 years. So I hear you. Loss is hard. Loss is hard, and I wanted to do this video because I don't know how Monday is gonna go, because it's my first birthday without John, and I love him and miss him so much. Although I know he's really happy and fine, but oh, it's so hard not to have him here. And so I wanted to do this video because I don't want my tears to be in vain. I don't want my sadness to just be wasted. I wanna put my pain to work. And I put my pain to work by doing stuff like this and loving you guys. So you are loved. You can leave your comments here. Whatever you do, do not give up. Do not give up. Do not give up. You are not alone. God is close to the brokenhearted. And you did not watch this video by coincidence. I hope these 10 things that I discovered since my husband went to heaven are hateful and bring joy and comfort to you. I'll talk to you guys later. God bless you. Bye.